Hey everybody, this is Dan Stillerman, founder of Excel Academy. Welcome to this video on how to create a pivot table in Excel in 3 minutes. So first of all, what exactly is a pivot table? It's a customizable table view of data that exists elsewhere in the same workbook. Now it's important to remember that a pivot table is actually not a real table, but rather a very helpful view of your data. So why learn about pivot tables and why use pivot tables? You can think of the data in your database as the engine in your car, complicated, confusing, and somewhat overwhelming. Now think of the pivot table as the dashboard in your car, showing you a quick, meaningful summary of your fuel, speed, engine temperature, etc. The pivot table can be thought of as the dashboard of your data. Now the good news is that creating pivot tables is really easy. Just follow this simple step-by-step guide. Let's now look at a simple example where a pivot table can be your dashboard. I have here a simple database of products. As you can see, the column headings are product, price, quantity sold, total, and date. I want to know how many units of each product were sold, and I want the data to be organized by date. In particular, I want to know how many of product 19 were sold on the 3rd of January 2014. Step 1. Select the data range, including the headings in the top row. This is important. Your pivot table will only work if it knows the headings for each column. Okay, step 2. Click the pivot table button in the tables group on the Insert tab. The Create Pivot Table dialog box opens. Your selected range is automatically inserted in the table range field. Also, the default setting is that the pivot table will be inserted in a brand new worksheet. Click OK to accept these default settings. A new sheet appears, in this case sheet 4, with an empty pivot table area on the left and a task pane on the right hand side. Step 3. I'm now going to use the task pane on the right to drag the fields that I want to the appropriate areas. In this case, I'll drag the product field to the row labels area at the bottom, so my pivot table rows show each product. Then I'll drag the date field to the column labels area, so that each column in my pivot table is a different date. Then finally, I'll drag the quantity sold field to the values area, so that my pivot table shows the quantity sold figures. Dragging the fields into the areas on the task pane magically sets the pivot table into action. I now have a very handy pivot table, which provides me with a snapshot of the relevant data in the original database. As you can see, the row labels are the product codes, the column labels are the dates, the values in the pivot table itself are the quantity sold figures. So to answer my question, the pivot table tells me that 189 units of product 19 were sold on the 3rd of January 2014. Remember, the pivot table is just a helpful view of the data. You can't actually edit the data inside the pivot table. Congratulations, you just learned how to create your first pivot table. Thanks for watching this video on how to create a pivot table in Excel in 3 minutes. The next video is on its way soon. In the meantime, you can visit www.excelacademy.co.za or like us on Facebook for regular tips, articles, and links.